The richest man in American history had a net worth of nearly $900 million in 1912. That's over $30 billion today. He did not earn it by working harder than anyone. He wasn't even showing up to the office by the end. By the time Standard Oil was printing billions, Rockefeller had 100,000 people working for him. He understood something that almost nobody around him did. Not a secret, not hidden, just something most people never figure out. Because the entire way we're taught to think about money makes it invisible. I'm going to show you what that thing is, why it's still available right now, and exactly why you've probably never used it, even though part of you already knows it exists. There is one mechanism that matters, one trade that's been running since before Rockefeller was born, and almost everyone is on the wrong side of it. When you work an hour for someone else, two numbers exist. The first number is what they pay you. The second number is what your work is actually worth to them. Those two numbers are never the same. If they were, there would be no business. There would be no profit. The entire economy runs on the gap between them. A lawyer bills $400 an hour and pays her associates $80. A contractor charges $150 for a job and pays his guys $25. A marketing agency invoices $10,000 for a campaign and pays the freelancer who builds it $800. This gap has a name. An economist named Karl Marx spent most of his life writing about it in the 1800s. He called it surplus value, the difference between what labor produces and what labor gets paid. He was describing the mechanism Rockefeller used to become the wealthiest man who ever lived. Marx thought the gap was a problem to fix. Rockefeller decided it was a machine to operate. Right now, you are on the producing side of this equation. Someone else is on the capturing side. That's not a conspiracy. That's just the structure. And the structure has a door in it. Those examples feel distant. A lawyer, a contractor, a marketing agency, abstract. Here's what it looks like from the inside of it. I was managing marketing for a coaching brand, one campaign. I made one change, a single tweak that took a few hours of actual work, and it added over $100,000 in revenue to that campaign. Nearly pure profit for the business. I was paid roughly $100 for it. $100 for work that produced $100,000, a ratio of 1,000 to 1. I'm not telling you that to make you angry at anyone. I'm telling you because that ratio is not unusual. It's how the structure works. The person coordinating the output captures most of what the output produces. The person doing the work captures almost none of it. That's not exploitation in some dramatic sense. That's just what the spread looks like when you're on the producing side and someone else is on the capturing side. The business wasn't cheating. The business was operating the machine exactly the way the machine is designed to run. What it did was make one thing very clear. I had a skill worth far more than the price being put on my time. And as long as I was selling my time, the person buying it would always capture the difference. Rockefeller didn't get rich in oil specifically. He got rich because he understood leverage before that word meant anything. Standard Oil started in 1870 with a handful of employees. By 1882, he had 100,000 people working across 20,000 wells. He wasn't working harder than 100,000 people. He was sitting at the top of a structure where every hour those 100,000 people worked, he captured a portion of the output. Think about what that actually means. If every one of those workers generated $2 per hour more than they were paid, that's $200,000 an hour flowing toward Rockefeller. Not because he was smarter than every one of them, because he positioned himself on the capturing side of the spread instead of the producing side. The oil didn't matter. He could have done it in timber, in steel, in anything where labor produces value and someone else coordinates the output. The mechanism is the same everywhere. This is the thing nobody teaches. The question isn't, how do you earn more per hour? The question is, how do you get on the side of the transaction where you're capturing the spread instead of providing it? Most people never ask that question. Not because the answer is complicated, because something underneath stops them from asking it at all. Here's the part that keeps people stuck even after they've understood the mechanism. They look at Rockefeller with 100,000 employees and think, that's not available to me. That's a different world. That's capital, connections, a different century. And they're right that the scale isn't available to them. But they've confused the scale with the structure. Those are two completely different things. The structure is just this. Someone coordinates work, someone else does it. And the coordinator captures the spread between cost and output. That structure works at 100,000 people. It also works at 3. The ratio doesn't change because the number does. a person who coordinates the work of 3 other people, is not doing something categorically different from what Rockefeller did. They're doing the same thing at a size that fits inside a single week and doesn't require a trust agreement or a railroad deal. The mechanism is identical. The numbers are smaller. The principle is the same. This is the illusion that keeps most people on the producing side their entire lives. They see the scale and assume it's a requirement. It isn't. The scale is what happens after you understand the structure, not before. Most people never get there, not because the structure is unavailable, because of what happens the moment they try to step into the coordinating role. Here's what's actually running underneath. Most people who understand the mechanism I just described still don't flip to the other side, not because they can't, because something inside them won't let them. I spent years doing this myself. Every time I started something new, every side hustle, every project, I did all the work, not because I had to, because I felt like I had to. The story running underneath was, I'm not making real money yet, so I can't afford to outsource. I have to do the work myself. I have to earn this. It all depends on me. I would catch myself formatting documents, doing admin, doing tasks that required zero skill, when I knew I could have paid someone $3 or $4 an hour to do exactly the same thing. I knew it, I did it anyway. This is not a rational economic decision, it's an identity. Maxwell Maltz, a plastic surgeon who spent decades studying why people resist changing their circumstances even when they clearly could, had a name for what's running underneath. He called it the self-image thermostat. Your brain has an internal picture of who you are and how you operate, and it steers you back toward that picture automatically, without asking permission. If your internal picture is, I am the person who does the work, then every time you think about paying someone else to do it, your brain generates friction, not logical objections, just resistance, the feeling that something is wrong, that you'd be cutting corners, that you haven't earned the right to let go yet. The brain then produces a list of reasons why it won't work. They would never pay me that. Nobody wants this. I don't know enough. I'm not ready. These feel like analysis. They're not. They're the thermostat doing its job. There's a specific version of this that stops more people than anything else. It's the feeling that you'd be charging for work you didn't fully do yourself. Think about the real mechanics. A local business needs a blog post. Their site hasn't been updated in 2 years. They don't have a marketing person. You could write the post with an AI tool in 20 minutes, charge $80, and the business gets something they never would have done on their own. They pay for the result, not the time. The result is real. The value is real. But something in your brain says that's cheating. You didn't bleed for it. You didn't spend 3 hours struggling through a draft. The ease makes it feel fraudulent. This is the self-image problem in its most specific form. The identity isn't just, I do the work. It's, I deserve to be paid in proportion to how hard I worked, which is the exact opposite of how every wealthy person in history has operated. Rockefeller wasn't paid based on how hard he worked. He was paid based on the output his organization produced. The fact that he barely showed up to the office by the time Standard Oil was at peak size wasn't a failure of integrity. It was the whole point. The fraud feeling is not a conscience. It's the thermostat telling you to stay where you are. Here's the thing about the thermostat Maltz was describing. It doesn't change through argument. You can't logic your way out of it. Understanding that the resistance is irrational doesn't make the resistance stop. Anyone who has tried to change a deep habit knows this. Knowing the cookie is bad for you does not make you not want the cookie. But there's another way it moves. Not through force, through replacement. I've been cutting for summer recently, training to get lean. And what I've noticed is that I don't experience the thing people describe, where they're standing in front of a cake trying not to eat it, gritting their teeth, white-knuckling through some moral test. I can look directly at the cake and feel nothing, not restraint, actual indifference, not because I have exceptional willpower, because at some point my brain decided it wanted the six-pack more than it wanted the cake. And once it made that decision, there was no longer a competing desire to fight off. The thermostat had moved. The cake was no longer in the same category. This is what Maltz was actually pointing at. The self-image thermostat doesn't shift because you convince yourself it's wrong. It shifts when the internal picture of who you are updates. When your brain stops identifying as someone who works for their money and starts identifying as something else entirely, the friction doesn't get harder to push through. It just isn't there anymore. The person who runs the spread doesn't feel like a fraud because their internal picture doesn't include, I must suffer in proportion to what I earn. They're not suppressing that belief. They simply don't hold it. That's not a mindset shift you can schedule. But it is worth knowing what it actually looks like, because most people who stay stuck don't know they're fighting a thermostat. They think they're making rational decisions. They think the reasons are real. They have no idea the machine is running. Here's what nobody is saying out loud. The gap between what skilled output costs and what businesses will pay for it has never been wider than it is right now. There are millions of companies, local businesses, small operations that need work done and have no one to do it. A restaurant that needs a flyer, an industrial company that needs one blog post a month, a contractor who needs 3 social posts a week. None of them have the bandwidth to hire a full-time person. Most of them have never tried to solve it. You could write that blog post with AI, charge $100, pay $10 for the writing, and pocket $90. That's not a hack. That's the same spread Rockefeller ran. The numbers are smaller. The mechanism is identical. The difference between that and what John D Rockefeller had is not some moral distinction. It's scale. He built a system with 100,000 people on the producing side. You build one with 3 or 5 or 10. Even at 3, you've multiplied what a single person can produce. Every hour that work gets done, while you're doing something else, is an hour you're on the capturing side of the equation instead of the producing side. The AI tools that make this work now didn't exist 5 years ago. The barrier to producing quality output is lower than it's ever been. The business need is not lower. It's the same. The spread is wider. Rockefeller was not a genius of oil. He was a genius of one specific idea. Get on the capturing side of the spread between what labor costs and what it produces. That idea is 150 years old. It has a name. Economists have written entire books about it, and almost nobody running the default script ever sees it clearly, because the way we're taught to think about money, about work, about what it means to earn something, is designed entirely around the producing side. School teaches you to be a good employee. Employment teaches you to trade hours for dollars. The whole architecture points you at the same side of the same transaction, forever. What Rockefeller saw, and what most people never see, is that the transaction has 2 sides, and the side you're on determines almost everything about where you end up. This is not about Rockefeller specifically. It's not about oil. It's not about the 1800s. The mechanism is running right now today, in every business you've ever worked for, every agency you've ever hired, every service you've ever paid for. 2 numbers exist: the cost of the work, the value of the output. Someone captures the spread. The reason that's been invisible to you isn't a failure of intelligence. It's a feature of the self-image you were handed before you were old enough to question it. The picture of yourself as the person who works, who earns, who deserves what they get in proportion to how hard they struggled for it. That picture is not neutral. It is a very specific set of instructions for which side of the transaction to stand on. Most people will go their entire lives on the producing side, not because it's the only option, because the thermostat was set before they knew the game existed. You now know the game exists.